Claude responded. When my daughter got married, I kept the ultimate secret. When my daughter got married, I kept the ultimate secret. I never told her that I still owned every acre of her late mother's vineyard, and thank God I stayed silent. Because exactly 9 days after I paid for her dream wedding, my new son-in-law walked into my kitchen with a stack of papers and a stranger in a cheap suit, ready to make me sign my own home away. But the confidence on his face disappeared completely the second he realized the document he was pushing across my table was about to become his own financial funeral. Before I tell you how I let them destroy themselves, tell me where you're watching from tonight, neighbor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe family only means something when it's built on respect, not on what they think they can take from you. My name is Walter Higgins. I am 68 years old. For 39 years, I worked as a union electrician, first climbing poles in the freezing Ohio wind, then running my own small contracting business out of a garage that never quite stopped smelling like solder and coffee. My hands are rough. My knuckles don't fully straighten anymore. I drive a truck with 210,000 miles on it because it still runs, and I see no reason to replace something that hasn't failed me yet. I raised my daughter, Renee, mostly on my own, after her mother, my wife Diane, passed away from cancer 11 years ago. Diane and I built a life most people never saw the real size of. She grew up on a small family vineyard outside Yamhill County, Oregon, land her own grandfather had cleared by hand, and when her parents passed, she inherited it quietly, the way people do in families that don't like to talk about money at the dinner table. We kept living simple. A modest house, in a modest neighborhood outside Columbus, flannel shirts. A garden out back. Nobody who met us would have guessed that 40 acres of some of the most sought-after Pinot Noir soil on the West Coast belonged to us. Free and clear, worth more than most people in our zip code would see in 3 lifetimes combined. To my new son-in-law, Cole, I was just Renee's aging father, a guy who fixed light switches for a living and drove an old truck. He had no idea about Diane's family, no idea about Oregon, no idea about any of it. Just 7 days before that morning in my kitchen, I had written a check for $94,000 to cover the wedding Renee said she'd always dreamed of. A ballroom downtown, a live string quartet. Flowers flown in from somewhere I couldn't even pronounce. I didn't argue. I didn't complain. She was my only child, and Diane wasn't there to see her walk down the aisle, so I made sure everything else about that day was exactly what our daughter wanted. I drained a good portion of my savings without a single second thought, because Cole told me, more than once, that it would set the right tone for their marriage, that it would show Renee she was starting her new life the way she deserved. And now, 9 days later, Cole was standing in my kitchen asking me to sign away the roof over my head. "Walter," he said, and his voice had that same practiced gentleness people use right before they ask you for money. "Renee and I have been talking. We're just really worried about you rattling around this house by yourself. You know your knee's not what it used to be. This place is a lot of upkeep for one man." I looked at him and kept my face perfectly still. "My knee's fine, Cole. I mow my own lawn. I cook my own meals. I was up on that roof in October clearing gutters." He gave a small laugh, the kind that isn't really a laugh, more a way of dismissing what I just said. "Things change fast at your age, though. 1 week you're fine. The next week you take a bad fall, and everything's different. Renee and I think it's time we start helping manage things for you. We found a really nice senior community about 20 minutes from here. Very affordable. But first we need to get the house transferred into our names, so we can list it and use the equity to get you settled somewhere safer. Whatever's left, we'll put towards starting our family." I felt something drop in my chest, heavy and cold. A senior community. A cheap one, dressed up in nicer words. This man was standing in the house where I had raised his wife, where Diane and I had painted every wall by hand, telling me he was going to lock me away in some facility and pocket the difference to fund his own future. I slowly turned my head toward the hallway. Renee had walked in behind him a few minutes earlier, holding a coffee cup from someplace downtown, scrolling through her phone like she wasn't even part of the conversation happening 6 feet away from her. She was 30 years old. I had taught her to ride a bike in the driveway of this exact house. I had sat up with her until 2 in the morning helping her memorize geometry proofs. I had worked double shifts the year she started community college so she wouldn't graduate with $1 of debt. "Renee," I said, and I let my voice carry the weight I actually felt. Are you hearing this? Are you part of this? She glanced up, but her eyes slid off mine fast. Like looking at me directly cost her something. Dad, come on. Don't make this a whole thing. Cole's right. You're getting older. We have to think ahead. It's just paperwork. It makes everything easier. Easier for them. That's what she meant, and we both knew it. The stranger standing near my refrigerator cleared his throat. He was a notary Cole had apparently hired and driven over that morning, and he looked deeply uncomfortable, like a man who had just realized he'd walked directly into somebody else's war. Sir, I just need to see identification and witness your signature on the pages marked with the tabs, he said quietly, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Cole tapped his knuckle against the paperwork on my kitchen table. Come on, Walter. We don't have all day. You know you can't keep living here alone forever. We're doing you a favor. I looked down at the pen sitting on top of the stack of documents. An ordinary black ballpoint, the kind you'd find in any drawer, and yet it was supposed to be the instrument that stripped me of my home. I looked at the son-in-law who had eaten at my table every Sunday for 2 years and saw me as nothing but an obstacle between him and a payday. I looked at my daughter, who couldn't meet my eyes. A slow burn started low in my stomach, the kind of anger that could easily become something loud and useless if I let it. But I had learned a long time ago, working on job sites with men twice my size and half my patience, that the loudest man in the room rarely wins. I needed to be smart. I needed to let them believe they already had me beaten. I reached my hand toward the pen and let my fingers tremble, just slightly, the performance of an old man who had run out of fight. As my fingers hovered there, my mind went somewhere else entirely. I thought about the day Diane and I first walked that vineyard together, back before either of us had a single gray hair, her boots crunching through rows of vines her grandfather had planted with his own 2 hands. I thought about how she used to say that land wasn't really about money to her. It was about her family's whole history, sitting quietly in the dirt, waiting. To hand any piece of my life over to a man who saw my kitchen table as nothing but square footage felt like spitting on everything she'd ever cared about. We're waiting, Walter, Cole said, his patience thinning fast. The notary's charging by the hour, you know. I let my hand hover, shaking harder now, watching them both lean forward slightly, hungry, certain they'd already won the opening round of a war they didn't even know they'd started. I'm not signing this, I said, and my voice came out steady, clear. None of the fear they'd been hoping for. The trembling stopped completely. The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel. The notary took a step back toward the door, gripping his folder against his chest like a shield. Renee's eyes went wide with genuine shock, but it burned off fast, replaced by something colder. Excuse me? Cole said, his easy charm gone in an instant, his jaw tightening. You're going to stand here and tell us no? After everything we've done for you? After all the time we've spent worrying about you? You haven't done anything for me, Cole, I said. I paid for your wedding 9 days ago. Now you're standing in my kitchen telling me to sign my house over so you can fund a nursery. His face went a dull, ugly red. You are unbelievable. Do you have any idea what it's like trying to plan a future with someone who refuses to think about anyone but himself? This house is wasted on one old man living alone. We're trying to build something and you're standing in the way of it. I turned my head toward my daughter. Renee, are you going to let him talk to your father like this? Are you really going to stand there and let him throw me out of my own home? I waited. I genuinely waited, hoping for some flicker of the girl I'd raised to show up in her face. But Renee stepped forward instead and put her hand on Cole's arm, a show of solidarity that told me everything I needed to know. Dad, we've given you plenty of time since Mom died, she said. Flat, detached, like she was reading off a script she'd rehearsed in the car. You need to accept that things have to change. This house is worth a lot of money, and it's just sitting here doing nothing for anybody. Cole straightened up, looming slightly over the table. Here's how this works. You're going to pick up that pen right now and sign this deed over to us. Cooperate, and we'll get you settled somewhere comfortable. Fight us on this, and I will personally call the police and tell them my elderly father-in-law is having a mental health episode and refusing to leave a property that legally belongs to his daughter. They'll take you in for an evaluation, Walter. Once you're in that system, everything gets a lot easier for us. I looked at this man, genuinely trying to understand how someone could say something like that to another human being's face. You'd really call the police on me? If I have to, he said without a flicker of hesitation. The threat sat in the room like something toxic. If I raised my voice now, if I gave him one single ounce of the reaction he was fishing for, I'd be handing him exactly the proof he needed. So instead, I let my shoulders cave forward. I let out a shaky breath. Please, I whispered, staring at my own hands. Please don't do this to me. I gave you everything I had. Renee rolled her eyes, arms crossed. Dad, stop with the dramatics. It's embarrassing. Just sign the paper before Cole loses his patience. And I reached my hand toward the pen again, forcing a violent little tremor into my fingers, and let it slip off the edge of the table, clattering onto the tile floor. I'm so sorry, I muttered, keeping my head down so neither of them could see the sharpness still sitting behind my eyes. My hands just aren't cooperating today. My chest feels tight. I think I need a minute. Cole groaned and dragged a hand down his face. You have got to be kidding me. I pressed my palm flat against my chest, breathing shallow and ragged. I need to go upstairs and get my reading glasses. I can't make out the words on this page. Just give me a few minutes to catch my breath. Renee threw her hands up. We don't have all day for this, Dad. Just go get your glasses, Cole snapped, waving me off. Be quick. We're not leaving until you sign. I nodded weakly and made my slow way toward the stairs, dragging my feet against each step like a man who'd already surrendered. I could hear Renee behind me, muttering to Cole about how exhausting I was being, and I let every word land, filing it away, feeding the quiet fire in my chest instead of letting it burn me from the inside. The moment I reached the top of the stairs and turned the corner into my bedroom, everything about me changed. My back straightened, my breathing slowed. I walked into the room Diane and I had shared for 31 years and locked the door behind me, not to search for reading glasses I didn't need, but to reach into my nightstand drawer for my phone. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice before a calm, sharp voice answered. Walter, this is early for you. Everything all right? Margaret Levinson was not a cheap local attorney. She was a trust and estate lawyer who worked out of a firm in downtown Portland. The same woman who had spent 3 years, at Diane's quiet insistence, structuring our family's assets so tightly that not even a determined lawyer with a grudge could unwind them. Margaret, I said, my voice low and even. My son-in-law is downstairs with a hired notary. He's trying to force me to sign the house over to them, and he's threatening to have me committed if I refuse. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Has he touched anything with your signature on it? No. I told them I needed my reading glasses to buy myself some time. Good. Her voice had steel in it now. Let them believe they've cornered you, Walter. It'll make the next part so much sweeter. Your assets, all of them, are completely locked. Diane made absolutely certain of that before she passed. Neither Cole nor Renee can touch a single acre of that vineyard. Not through this house. Not through any document he shoves in front of you. He's chasing something that was never his to take. Relief washed through me, but underneath it sat something heavier, something sadder. Because Margaret's words confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect, ever since I'd overheard something I was never meant to hear. 9 days earlier, at Renee's wedding reception, I had stepped away from the noise of the band to find a quiet corner, and I'd ended up in a hallway near the coat check, hidden in shadow, when I heard Cole's voice around the corner, low and urgent, talking to someone on the phone. I hadn't meant to listen, but what I heard froze me in place. He was talking to a real estate developer, someone he called Danny, about a piece of land in Oregon he referred to only as the old man's vineyard. He said they just needed a few more weeks to finalize things with the electrician, his exact words, dismissive, almost amused. He said once the house was legally theirs and I was somewhere safe, meaning locked away, the vineyard would eventually pass to Renee through probate, and they could sell the whole 40 acres to a hospitality group looking to build a boutique resort. He laughed about it. He said something about how much easier this would all be than actually working for a living. I had stood frozen against that wall, waiting, praying that my daughter had no idea what her new husband was planning. But the bathroom door swung open seconds later, and Renee walked out, wrapping her arm around Cole's waist, kissing his cheek, asking if the call with Danny had gone well. Cole told her it had gone perfectly, that they just needed to keep playing the part of the concerned, loving children a little while longer. And Renee had smiled and said that shouldn't be too hard. That was the moment something inside me quietly finished dying. Margaret's voice pulled me back into the present. "Walter, are you still there?" "I'm here," I said. I heard them planning this at the wedding. Both of them. Renee wasn't tricked into anything. She knew. Margaret was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that told me she understood exactly how much that admission cost me. "I'm sorry, Walter. I truly am. But it changes nothing about your position. You are protected. Completely. Let them play their hand. I'll have the paperwork ready to file within the hour if you need it." I thanked her, ended the call, and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I walked over to my dresser, where a photograph of Diane sat in a simple wooden frame, taken years ago at the edge of the vineyard, her hair pulled back, laughing at something just out of frame. I looked at her for a long moment. "I kept my promise," I said quietly to the empty room. "Nobody's taking what your family built." I opened the drawer, pulled out my actual reading glasses, more for the theater of it than anything else, and made my way back down the stairs, each step slow and deliberate, playing the broken old man one more time before I ended the performance entirely. Renee was pacing near the window when I came back into the kitchen, and Cole was leaning against the counter checking his watch, clearly irritated at having lost 15 minutes of his afternoon. The notary looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. "Finally," Cole muttered. "Let's get this done." I sat down slowly at the table, picked up the pen, and looked at both of them for a long moment. "Before I sign anything," I said, my voice suddenly clear and completely without a tremor, "I want to ask you both something. Cole, who's Danny?" The color drained out of his face so fast it was almost comical. "What?" he said. "Danny. The real estate developer you were talking to outside the bathroom at the wedding. The one you told the paperwork on the old man's vineyard would be finalized soon, once I was somewhere safe." Renee's coffee cup slipped slightly in her hand. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the 40 acres of vineyard in Yamhill County that your mother inherited from her family years before I ever met her," I said. "The same 40 acres she legally transferred solely into my name 3 years before she died, specifically because she was worried about exactly this. Worth, according to my attorney's last valuation, just under $15 million. Free and clear. No mortgage. No lien. And completely, permanently outside the reach of anyone trying to force their way into it, through a quit-claim deed on a house that was never the real prize to begin with." The kitchen went dead silent. The notary actually took a step toward the door. "You're lying," Cole said, though his voice had lost every trace of the command it carried 20 minutes earlier. "There's no way some electrician's family owns land worth $15 million, I said again, calmly, watching the number physically land on both of their faces. "Diane's family cleared that land 3 generations ago. We never talked about it because we never needed to. We lived simply because we wanted to, not because we had to. You saw an old man in a flannel shirt and a beat-up truck and decided that was the whole story." Renee's face had gone pale. "Dad, I didn't know about any resort deal. I swear I never—" "Stop," I said, and something in my voice made her actually stop. "I heard you both. At the wedding, I heard Cole tell Danny it wouldn't be hard, once the house was signed over and I was, in his words, somewhere safe. And I heard you, Renee, ask if the call went well, and laugh when he said it did. I stood in that hallway and prayed you had no idea what he was planning, but you did. You knew exactly what this was." She didn't say anything. That was its own kind of answer. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Cole said, trying one last time to find his footing, some remnant of the confidence he'd walked in with. "We can still contest this. We can prove you're not fit to manage your own affairs. And you can try," I said, "but I'd think very carefully before you do, because the moment you make that call to have me evaluated, my attorney files a report with the state documenting a coordinated attempt at elder financial exploitation, complete with a recorded, overheard conversation about the specific mechanism you intended to use. That's not a civil matter anymore, Cole. That's a criminal one. And you, Renee, married into a plan to have your own father declared incompetent, so your husband could liquidate your mother's family legacy for a hotel chain's benefit. I'd think about how that sits with you long after today." The notary quietly gathered his folder and let himself out the front door without another word. clearly deciding this was no longer any business of his. Cole stood there for a long moment, jaw working, clearly running through every option and finding none of them worked in his favor. Finally, he grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair. "This isn't over," he muttered, though it came out sounding hollow, like he already knew it was. Renee lingered by the door. "Dad," she said quietly, and for the first time all day, there was something real in her voice, something that sounded almost like the daughter I remembered. I didn't think it through. I just wanted things to be easier. "Easier for who, Renee?" I asked. "Not for me. You knew what he was planning and you smiled and kissed him for it. That's not confusion. That's a choice." She didn't have an answer for that either. She followed Cole out the door a few minutes later, and I stood alone in my kitchen listening to their car pull out of the driveway, the sound fading into the quiet of the afternoon. In the weeks that followed, I did not hear from Renee. I did not reach out either. It wasn't cruelty. It was the same hard, necessary discipline Diane and I had practiced our whole marriage. The belief that love without consequences isn't really love at all. Just a slow, patient enabling of somebody's worst instincts. If I had softened, if I had let this slide because she was my only child, I would have taught her that betrayal costs nothing as long as you cry a little afterward. I would have handed both of them exactly the lesson they'd counted on, that I was too weak and too sentimental to ever really say no. Instead, I drove out to Oregon that spring, back to the vineyard I hadn't visited in almost 2 years. I walked the rows Diane's grandfather had planted, breathed in the smell of the soil, and made a decision. I didn't sell it. I didn't hand it to a developer, and I didn't leave it sitting untouched as a monument to old grief either. I partnered with a small nonprofit that helps young people aging out of the foster care system learn a trade, working the land, learning viticulture, learning what it means to build something slowly instead of demanding it be handed to you. We opened the first cottages that fall. Diane would have loved watching kids who'd never had anyone in their corner finally getting the chance to plant something and watch it grow. I sit on my porch most evenings now, back in Ohio, coffee in hand, and I think about her a lot. I think about the promise I made her years ago, quietly, before the cancer took her, that I would protect what her family built, no matter what it cost me. I kept that promise. It cost me my daughter's easy affection, at least for now. And some nights that ache sits heavier in my chest than I'd like to admit. But I've learned, at 68 years old, after a lifetime of hard work and a few hard betrayals, that real love isn't a shield you hold up to protect someone from the consequences of their own choices. Sometimes real love means stepping back and letting the truth land exactly where it needs to. If you constantly rescue people from what they've earned, you're not saving them. You're just teaching them that cruelty has no price tag as long as they're family. If you've ever had to make a decision like that, to let someone you love hit the ground so they might actually learn how to stand back up, tell me about it, neighbor. Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and it helps to know none of us are carrying these hard family lessons alone. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Claude responded, "Some of the deepest kindness looks like patience, not softness. Sometimes loving someone fully means letting them face what they've earned, so they can find tea. Some of the deepest kindness looks like patience, not softness. Sometimes loving someone fully means letting them face what they've earned, so they can find their own way back to who they really are. What we build quietly, with honesty and hard work, always outlasts what someone else tries to take by force. And love, the real kind, keeps showing up gently at the door, even after silence, even after hurt." A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its gentle life lesson stays with you all the same.